You don't have to look far to see the moral decline and decay that's happening in America today. But is it possible to predict and know what is going to happen next? Today I have Jonathan Cahn joining me on the show to unpack the battle that is happening in the spiritual realm and what that means for you and your future. For access to today's entire show, become a subscriber at endtimes.com for only $7 a month. I also want to remind you of my new book, Look Up, which is available now. Just visit the link below to purchase it. I'm Jimmy Evans. Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I am so glad that you have joined me today. I'm honored today to have joining me on the show my good friend Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. He's a New York Times bestselling author of many books. He leads Hope of the World Ministry. It's an international outreach of teaching, evangelism, and compassion projects for the world's most needy. He also leads the Jerusalem Center, Beth Israel, a worship center made up of Jews and Gentiles, people of all backgrounds, just outside of New York City in Wayne, New Jersey. He's joining me today to talk about his newest best-selling book, Return of the Gods. Rabbi, thank you for joining me today.
Great to be with you, Jimmy, always.
Well, you are my favorite author, period. Beginning with The Harbinger that just absolutely blew my mind. In every one of your books, I mean, I tell all of my friends, you just have to read them. They're just the best thing in the world. Return of the Gods, when you were with us last year at our prophecy conference, you're going to be with us again next September at the prophecy conference. You talked about the return of the gods, and it's the most current thing that I can think of that's happening in the world. And that's what I believe your gift is that God speaks to you concerning the big picture of what's happening. But like beginning with The Harbinger, what was happening in America at that time. But now the Return of the Gods. So talk about what does the book, The Return of the Gods, what does it reveal?
Yeah, what is happening in America, it's been accelerating, and even non-believers are saying this is crazy. Even classical liberals are saying this is crazy. The transformation that is happening to our culture, our schools, our children, it is something that actually goes back, and this is what the Return of the Gods opens up. Could this actually go back, number one, to the Bible, of course, and then to the tablets of Mesopotamia? Could what we are witnessing, could this be linked to what the Bible actually warns us about? Could what we talk about as gods, there's fiction, of course, and it's mythology, but could there be something real to them? And does the Bible actually say that? And what would happen if these entities behind the gods came back to America? What would happen if we turned away from God? What would happen to America? What would happen to the world? Well, it's happening. And, it is affecting everything. Everybody who's watching is dealing with it. It doesn't matter who you are, you're dealing with it. And what if we could actually identify these gods or entities or principalities? And is there hope? What do we do? How do we deal with it? Where is it going? What do we need to know as believers? So that is what the Return of the Gods opens up. And as you said, I do believe that I needed to do it for now. I mean, this is during the lockdown. I said, this has to be now. I knew it was going to be controversial, but I knew I had to do it now. And so, I believe we are all dealing with it right this moment.
Well, it's oppressive. It's, when it says that Lot's righteous soul was vexed, I think a lot of believers feel that way today. I read in the paper this morning that there was a teacher this week fired in California because she would not lie to a student's parents about her sexual orientation. And they fired her and said, because you will not align with the values of the state of California in protecting this, transgender rights and whatever, we're going to fire you. It's the crazy stuff like that is happening every single day. So talk about the mystery of the spirits and what that has to do with possession, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the Bible speaks about the gods quite a lot. And one of the things people don't realize, it says something that many believers kind of just go right over. In Deuteronomy and also in the Psalms, it said when it speaks about the gods, it uses a Hebrew word called the Shedim. Shedim means literally spirits, so when they were worshiping the gods, they're actually worshiping or serving the Shedim spirits this is with will, with volition, with consciousness. That's what it's saying. Behind the gods were actually spirits. Now, when this was translated into Greek and went into the New Testament, the word for shedim was daimonia. We get the word demon from it, demonic from it. So when Paul says the pagan world, they're worshiping, the demonic, the daimonia, it's saying that it's not just mythology, that behind it there are dark spirits. And you think, like, what would the Bible says, it speaks about the reality of this. We ignore it at our peril. What would happen, what would be more natural for such a spirit to do than to get the worship of God away from God and to itself. So everywhere in the world there were gods, and behind the gods are spirits. So if the pagan world was given to the gods, that means they were also given to the spirits. And when you look at the pagan cultures, you see the exact same signs, manifestations of demonic possession that the Bible speaks about. It's all over. But then something happened, and what happened was Jesus happened, and what happened was the gospel went into the world, and so what happened? So when you look at the first centuries and you look at the book of Acts, you see it's a clash. It's a clash of spirits. Why were the believers thrown to the lions in the early days? Because of the spirit. They would not bow down to the gods. If that's the only thing they had to do was offer incense to the gods. They didn't. So you have this gigantic clash, and it's a clash of spirits. You have the power of God coming into the world of the gods. You have the power of the spirit coming into the world of the spirits. And in the end, of course, it prevails. And so monotheism prevails. The gods are on their way out. You have the shrines of Dionysus are abandoned. The temples of Zeus are empty. But the thing is, if behind the gods were spirits, then it wasn't just the ending of worship of these gods. It was a mass exorcism. It was Western civilization was exorcised. We have to, this is one of the most important things we can understand. That's what made the West different. It was unlike the other culture, exorcised, but here's the thing, what happens, because the gods, behind the gods are spirits don't die. So that means there's a warning that they can come back. And actually the warning comes from Jesus, and actually a parable that people don't realize is actually a prophetic warning.
Man, well, I've heard you say before about this mass exorcism of the West. We take that for granted. But what's really happening now is we're seeing the repossession of the West in America now on was it the Grammys or the Oscars a couple of weeks ago? Sam Smith, the singer, dressed up like the devil, and they were, singing this song about evil and all those kinds of things like that. It's becoming more and more blatant. Satanism is becoming more and more blatant on school campuses and in institutions and things like that. So you talk about unlocking this mystery of the return of the gods, the house of the spirits. So talk about that.
Yeah. Well, most believers know that Jesus gave a parable about this, but they don't realize how big this is, and that is that the ramifications. He said, when a spirit leaves a man, it goes looking for a place to dwell, but doesn't find it. Says, I'm going to go back to my house. Talking about the guy, goes back to the man, and then says, you know what? He finds the house clean and swept and empty. Brings back 7 other spirits more evil. They take over the house. They repossess the man. And the Lord says the end of the last state is worse than the first state. And so now we could take that, most people do. Well, it's about the man, and if once you know the Lord, don't turn away. That's all true. But it's deeper than that, because at the end of it in Matthew, he says, so it shall be with this generation. He's not talking about just one man. He's talking about an entire generation, a culture. Cultures can be possessed. Cultures can be delivered, civilizations can be repossessed. So the warning is this: when you take it to its ultimate, if our civilization was delivered of these things, paganism, delivered of all these things, well, the warning is that any nation, any civilization, any culture that has been delivered of these things and then turns away from God, empties itself of God, those spirits that were cast out of it will come back into it.
Wow.
Those ancient spirits that we talk about from the beginning of the age, those same ones will come back into it. In a sense, the gods will return to take possession. So look at, Jimmy, consider, what happened to Russia when they turned away from God. It wasn't neutral. Communism wasn't neutral, or it was demonic.
Right.
Millions were killed.
Right.
What happened when the land of the Reformation turned away from God? Germany, what happened was not neutral, it was demonic.
Right.
And so the scary thing is that it's a dangerous thing for any culture to turn away from the gospel, to turn away from God, and turn away from very dangerous. And the thing is, now it's happening in America.
Yes,
it's happening around the world. It's actually the biggest turning away. It may be more gradual than, say, Hitler or, say, Stalin, but it is happening all over. This is an end time thing. And so the thing is that what it means is that what we are witnessing, what we've witnessed for the last half century of America, is not natural, it is supernatural. It is a possession. It's a repossession. It is a paganization. Everything that's been happening is moving in the realm of paganization, because in the end, it's either the gospel or it's paganism.
Right.
There's no middle ground. And we should, what's happening now is kind of shocking. You just said what happened on the Grammys. It's always like, then what's the next darkness they're going to go to? But this is all part of paganization. So we are witnessing something very big, and it's affecting everything.
Well, you see the reversal of Roe versus Wade last summer, and riots break out, and now you have states trying to codify. You have the United States House and Senate trying to codify abortion and say this is a basic human right that we have. And this goes back to Moloch, the worship of Moloch and the killing of children. In other words, this is not new, what we're seeing. So if the gods returned, the spirits returned, what would that look like?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is it would happen when America or the West begins emptying itself of God, the warning of Jesus. So when did that happen? Well, it happened particularly blatant. It began in the early 60s. We began the removal of God. Started with prayer out of school. Let's just, they think, well, it's going to be a little thing. It's not a little thing. When you separate God from the children, you're separating God from the future. And everything that's happened now began then.
Wow.
And so, and when you look at it and look at the warning, Jimmy, of that the Lord gave, it's saying that the house, you empty the house of God, it's not going to stay empty.
Yeah.
So here you take God out of the schools and God out of the children. Look what now has come into the schools. Look what has come into the children. And this is it's all like clockwork. It had to happen because once you do this with God. So the thing is that the question is, which gods? Well, when you look at when Israel, the only test case we have in a sense is Israel. When Israel turned away from God, they went after other gods. Other gods took over the culture, ultimately destroyed them. And there were several gods, but three in particular that kind of sum up the entire fall. And I call it in the Return of the Gods, I call it the Dark Trinity. The first one is called the possessor, and that is exactly what his name means. In Hebrew, the word is Baal. We call him Baal, but that means the possessor, the master, the owner, the Lord. And so what happens is he's the one who basically, as soon as the culture begins to turn, he in Israel, he drove God out of, the Spirit seeks to drive God out of everything, drive God out of the public squares, out of the culture, out of the government. Well, that's exactly what's been happening step by step since the 60s. But also the Bible says he caused Israel to forget God. And so here we are watching a nation that once knew God, once actually had its teachers in public school leading all of its children in the Lord's Prayer. We can't even remember that, America. Forget remembering God. We can't even remember that we once were that nation. And so we see that happen. It also says that he caused Israel to basically turn away from the commands or ways of God. Well, we've been watching that overturn since the 60s, has not stopped to this day. But literally, it has caused America to strike down the 10 Commandments, literally, just as Israel did. But also it's behind things like, we don't even realize it's behind things like wokeism.
We have much more from Jonathan's interview on endtimes.com on our subscription site, including what signs he is seeing in America today that shows our culture is being overtaken by the pagan world. To become a subscriber, visit endtimes.com and join us for only $7 a month. Along with the rest of today's interview, you'll get access to all of our End Times articles, shows, and teaching. Join us at endtimes.com today.